Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie Blume, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today I am super excited to talk with David Priemer about focusing on the problems in sales. So David is the founder of Cerebral Selling, the author of Sell the Way You Buy, which I love that title for a book. And he's a research scientist turned tech entrepreneur. So super excited to have David here. Thanks so much for being here. Do you mind taking some time to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's great to be with you, Maggie. Thanks for inviting me. I think your intro is great. You know, like everyone else, I got into sales by accident. You know, no one goes to school for this. And I joined a startup at the turn of the dot-com boom, like around 1999, 2000. I started my career, as you said, as a research scientist and absolutely fell in love with sales because it was so much like a science and engineering problem. Like there's all these variables and it's really complicated. But I realized over the course of time, having done a number of startups that one of my companies was acquired by Salesforce and I worked at Salesforce for 5 years, that, you know, I love sales, but I don't like talking to salespeople. And I don't think a lot of people do either. And unfortunately, a lot of things that we've been learning and taught in sales over the years is actually not good. So I kind of set out on this mission to do my part to rehabilitate the world of sales by diving back into kind of like the science and empathy-based tactics that have been shown to work the best and that people can execute with high conviction. So that's what I do.
Amazing. Yeah, and I completely agree with you. As being a salesperson, I sell to other salespeople, so I talk about sales a lot, and as you do the same too. But yeah, there's some things that, you know, we go through and processes that are outdated, I think, in my mind, but they're still there. People are still teaching them to others. So I just love that you put yourself in the position of the buyer's part of this whole process. And like you said, kind of having that scientific background helps, which it's funny how we all fall into it and how we all bring our different strengths. You know, a lot of people that come from the theater background into sales, obviously they have like an amazing strength in there too. But yeah, super interested to talk about this today. And David, I came across his YouTube videos where he goes into more depth about this. So if anyone's interested in checking that out later, go for it. But yeah, to get right into it, you know, we're going through an economic downturn right now. People are getting laid off from companies. You know, people aren't bringing in as much revenue to their businesses. So to start it off, why do you think teams are struggling during this economic downturn?
Yeah, well, I think in any economic downturn, you know, wallets get tightened and there's a lot more scrutiny on certain purchases. And, you know, one of the things that is kind of problematic is that in good times, you know, when companies have money and, you know, things are generally okay, a lot of the things that we do in sales, which are not the best, sometimes get covered up by the fact that, you know, times are good. You know, like imagine, you know, maybe there's someone out there who's, you know, sold Zoom at the, you know, the beginning of the pandemic, and, you know, the thing is flying off the shelves and they're like, look how great a salesperson I am. Like I'm selling all this stuff. You know, and at the same time, you know, when things get tougher, all of a sudden, and of course that's like a, you know, that would be a unicorn kind of example. But, you know, when companies have money, they're willing to kind of take greater risks in making investments. And you don't have to try as hard. And sometimes, you know, if you have an amazing product and it's whiz bang and space age, again, like that can sometimes obfuscate some of the challenges that you're having in your sales motion. And so what's happening now is that, you know, when people are struggling, when people are losing their jobs and you know, people are not just, challenged in their businesses, but fearful of what the future might hold. So imagine, you know, let's say you're doing pretty good and I said, well, there's a recession coming. Even though things are pretty good, you would automatically start to kind of cut back and be more conservative. Yeah. So sometimes just the perception of fear is enough. And so that's what you're seeing in the market. And so sales reps who are going out and companies going out who are executing the same tactics that may have worked even a year ago are finding that they're not working anymore because companies are taking a much more kind of conservative approach to their investments.
Got it. Yeah. So just being mindful and, like you said, those things that were average that sales reps were doing aren't really going to work right now. And I love that example you put in with Zoom because, yeah, if I worked at Zoom, then I would probably be a pretty popular sales rep too, or feeling really good about myself, even though maybe I didn't have a lot to do with it. But, and this is where, you know, I've read from some of your content too, where sales reps should be leading with problems. So could you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of sales reps, especially in the technology space, they tend to fall in love with their products, right? Like, and in fact, we might get to this a little bit later on, but one of the biggest challenges is that as we try to train our reps, a lot of the training that we give our reps and the sales process that we put in play is all geared around the product. So it's like, get them to the demo, get them to the POC, get them to the business case, ask them these, kind of questions, and then just kind of show them the thing, and then, their minds are going to be blown. And so in a time where, customers really, and I've said this for years, like, they don't care about your product. And, a little bit of like the empathy that I brought being a Salesforce customer a few times before they acquired my startup and I ended up working there was I would tell my reps, I'm like, your customers don't care about us. They don't care about you. They don't care about your quota. They don't care about our products. They only care about one thing, which is themselves and their problems and solving those problems. And so unfortunately, especially in the tech space, again, we're conditioned to lead with products and get them to the demo, especially as we have a lot of like younger sales reps. The average age of a seller is getting less. And so sometimes we don't feel, this is a whole other thing, but sometimes we don't feel comfortable going toe-to-toe with the customers that we're being asked to call on. That's true. It's like this mechanism of safety. Just get them to the product, just show them the thing. And again, our customers aren't focused on that. And they're not really going to get a good sense of like how awesome your product is just from like a quick demo. What we first need to do is we need to, first of all, understand the problem that they're solving, the problem that they're experiencing, that we can help them solve. But also deepening their appreciation and understanding of that problem and why they haven't been able to solve it on their own. So, if I said, hey, look, do you want to get in shape? You'd be like, sure, like I want to get in shape and be strong and all that kind of stuff. And I said, great, let me show you my gym and my whatever, my workout routine, and I got all these videos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you may not be focused on A, the product, and B, you might not appreciate the priority associated with trying to get in shape. Maybe it's not that important to you.
Yeah.
And so deepening a customer's appreciation of the problem is the most important thing we can do to get them to lean in and say, well, tell me more. How can you help?
Got it. So yeah, deepening that understanding from there. And then I like the way that you put it is, understanding the problem that they're having, solving that problem. And I think I just had an aha moment when you were talking earlier that the age of sales reps is getting lower and lower. And I started in sales when I was 22. And from what you're saying, it's like you feel comfortable. Like I'm remembering when I was 22, you feel comfortable thinking like, okay, I'm going to do less of the talking and more of the showing of a product because the product is going to be more important than me talking about their problems, if that makes sense. So it's like, do you feel like there's kind of this, because like sales reps almost being scared because they don't feel like they're in the position yet to be the expert or have that expert knowledge to keep talking with those people? Because that's kind of what I thought about when you were just saying that to me.
Oh, Maggie, you've opened Pandora's box now. I have a ton I wrote an article in Harvard Business Review a few years ago. It was called How Younger Salespeople Can Win Older Buyers or Older Customers.
Yeah.
And in that, I talk about this in my book, and I have an article on my website. I call it, experience asymmetry, this concept of like this imbalance, right? Like when you're a younger, less experienced seller, calling on a more senior, more experienced buyer whose job you've never done.
Yeah.
Which is actually, and I say like younger, you don't have to be 22 calling on a 50-year-old customer. You could be, an experienced seller, even calling on a new like new to your company, and you don't know like the pattern, you don't know the narrative yet, and you're calling someone again whose job you've never done. That describes like 99% of sales, right?
Totally.
And so what happens is, and I noticed this at Salesforce, so I used to run small business for the Eastern US, so I had reps in different cities, and my New York City sales reps would always hustle the most calls, the most emails, all that kind of stuff.
Sounds right.
But sometimes I would have these reps that would have tons of activity and no pipeline. So I would start asking them, like, so Maggie, what's going on? Do you not have enough accounts? Do you not calling people at the right time? Do you not know what to say? And they're like, no, David, I'm doing all those things. So I'd have no recourse just to listen to their calls. I just have to listen to some of the calls, and maybe I can pick something up. And I would imagine you're in my position. I'm just closing my eyes, and I'm just listening for whatever. And I'm listening, and I'm like, Maggie, it sounds to me like you're bothering this customer. Like, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like the way my kids sound when they're about to ask me for something that they already think I'm going to say no to, right?
That's such a borrowing the car.
Yeah, like borrowing the car. My daughter, she has a 6 a.m. volleyball practice she's on the team at her school, and she comes down to my office late at night, and she's like, and she's forgotten, so she needs a lift at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So she comes down to my office, and she's like, Dad, how much do you love me? And I'm like, the answer's no, right? Like, I'm immediately defensive.
Yeah.
And so 1,000%, when we're young, when we're less experienced, calling on more senior, buyers, and we're a little bit afraid about the value that we're adding, because we're not curing cancer, we're not feeding children in starving third world countries. A lot of us in our space, we're selling technology, we're selling services. And so we're afraid, and customers can feel the manifestation of that fear in your tone, in your words. And so if you don't come in there and by the way, it's not just being able to focus on the problems, but I have a lot of clients that say, yeah, like, David, we have this great scripted narrative, and then the customer asks us something or objects and says, oh, this is too expensive, or it's not a priority, or we're going to solve this on our own. And then the reps are like, shoot, I don't know how to respond to this. And then they get completely thrown off their game. So if I'm locked into a script, like ask this, get them to the demo, and then something happens, I have no basis to recover from that. And customers can feel that. And the second they feel that fear, they lose interest, because all of a sudden the conviction's gone.
Yeah, of course. And making sure that can breathe through on a call. I mean, even at the beginning of this call, I was nervous to talk with you, David. Probably showed through a little bit. But I have listened back to my own calls of where I definitely felt nervous. And also when you're getting at that level with like when you're digging deeper in discovery, I feel like that's where, when I first started doing it, it started to feel really unnatural. I felt uncomfortable because, at first I don't think I was doing it the right way. But second, just like talking about those things where I thought like, I'm just going to show the product because I'm more confident that like if they see it, that if I stop talking as much or whatever, that it's just all going to work out there. And I think you brought up a good point of like, we have all these frameworks and scripts that we use. And that feels really good when you're young, because you're like, okay, I'm still learning things like that, et cetera. But then there should be some creativity in there, or there should be some lean into being curious and digging deeper with problems. And that's a lot of what has helped me become a better sales rep. But the big question I have is, how do you find that balance between the process, like that script, and then the creative freedom for those sales reps?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why sales is hard, and we don't pay high school students minimum wage to do it, at a certain level. Mm-hmm. And exactly kind of what you said, like sometimes we get too pigeonholed into like our narrative, and there's no room for creativity, and there's no room for curiosity. I hear this complaint from a lot of my clients, which is, our reps are, if I can paraphrase, like our reps are really good at playing sheet music, but not jazz. Like they don't know how to improvise when something kind of goes off course. And so if we just teach them how to do this thing, then we're going to be challenged. And so again, like my advice is to help your reps really understand like the nature of the problem. In fact, what I tell my clients is I'm like, you should be able to get 75% of the way through your initial pitch or your first call deck or whatever it is without even talking about what you do. Because what you do is irrelevant, right? If I can talk to you about the problem you're experiencing and deepen your awareness of the problem and why you haven't been able to solve it on your own until now, you will and not even talking about what it is I do, you will automatically think that I'm in a position to help you solve the problem. For example, we're talking now about concepts like experience asymmetry and stifling our natural curiosity by being too locked into a script. And we're talking about all these things, and hopefully you can feel, and if you're listening out there, you can feel, number one, I love what I do, right? I love what I do, and I hope you can feel it. But also, like, I've seen this a lot. Now, you don't even know really like what I do, what my business actually does. We haven't even really talked about that. And it doesn't matter, because if you've been listening to some of these problems and challenges and now you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like I maybe you started listening to this episode and maybe you didn't fully appreciate, the gravity of the situation that you or your reps found yourselves in, or why it's been so challenging selling in this environment. And now you're listening to me saying, oh, you know what? By the way, I'm not being braggadocious. I'm stepping outside myself to say, like, maybe you're listening and saying, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. I wonder what this guy does, right? And then you're going to go to my website, or you're going to check out, like, and it almost doesn't matter, again, what I do.
Yeah.
You're leaning in and you're saying, like, hopefully I get everything you're saying, David. And it sounds like, because if you're talking about this stuff, that it's something you've seen a lot, and maybe you can help us. It's no different than, and I'll give a shout out to my sister. She's a fitness coach, so she's all on the Instagram and all that kind of stuff, right? And so she's my little sister. She's 44. She has 3 kids, and she specifically coaches women over 40 who are trying to get in really great shape. And so what does she do? She doesn't go out there and say, hey, I'm such and such, and I have a program, and da-da-da-da, because, like, no one cares, right? She goes out there and she says, hey, women over 40, so all of a sudden people are paying attention. And she says, like, if you're trying to get in shape, you're probably struggling, and you're struggling to do that. There's a number of reasons why, you're having that problem. One of the biggest reasons women over 40 struggle to get in shape is they skip breakfast. Are you skipping breakfast? Let me tell you, like, here's the bad thing about skipping breakfast. And she goes into that thing. And now, if you're a woman over 40 and you're trying to get in great shape and you're thinking to yourself, oh, shoot, I am skipping breakfast. Okay, let me listen to this. And then she can go deeper. She'll say, and look, even if you said, okay, great, now I gotta have breakfast now. The question is, well, what should I have? Right? Because I can still choose the wrong thing. So you see, not only am I talking about the problem you're experiencing, but now I'm talking about the problem with the problem. And I can keep going deeper. Even once you decided, okay, here's what I need to eat in terms of food groups and stuff, the question is, like, portion size and, like, how often, at what time of the morning. So, like, this is not my area of expertise.
What
I have
brand,
no idea.
Too.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about.
You just keep going deeper and deeper into the problem. Now, by the way, I'm not suggesting, if you're listening to this, that you kind of fearmonger and talk about fears. And also, you don't have to go through that whole problem spectrum. I'm going to have a conversation with you, Maggie, and depending on what I learn about you and where you are on that spectrum, like, maybe you're a woman over 40 and you're not interested in getting in shape. So, like, maybe I need to start further upstream. Or maybe you're a woman over 40 who's interested in getting in shape and you already know that you should be eating breakfast, right? So I'm going to start further down the spectrum, right? And so that's the kind of the point of discovery, is to figure out where your customer is on that journey. So I'm not suggesting you just kind of come out guns a-blazing with, like, problems all over the place. The problems still have to be overwhelming, for sure. The problems still have to be focused and tailored. And it should also feel like human, like you're having a discussion with a person, not someone who's reading off a script and politely interrogating you.
Yeah. And I like that you put the word interrogating at the end of it, because so many times, and I've made this mistake myself, where you can be really good at finding out those problems. You can be really good at talking about them, but you don't have any empathy alongside them going through the journey of it. So, like, just saying, hey, don't worry, I've had someone in this position before. And I've actually accidentally skipped that before. And I come across listening back to it like, oh my gosh, did I just make that person feel bad for having this problem that most people do? And I laugh at myself now because I'm like, I definitely did, like, unintentionally, because not really was it a script, but I was so focused on, like, okay, I need to, portray this problem to them, talk about it with them, that I actually forgot that one little piece of it that I think could have helped me a little bit better too.
100%. No, look, being human and just, like, having that human conversation, it changes the whole feel, that you have, with that other person, especially if that other person is, again, older, more experienced. Because on one hand, they're thinking in the back of their head, like, who the hell is this kid, or who the hell is this person?
Yeah.
And what are they going to teach me about, running my business? And I was like you. I started my career in sales. I was 25. We were selling an enterprise workforce management software product. And so I would go into, like, banks and manufacturing organizations and airlines. And I was a solution engineer, by the way. So shout out to all the SCs out there. Like, I would do custom coding for demos and doing all these things. And people would joke, and I talk about this in the articles, like, people would joke that they had systems at their company that were older than I was, right? And they themselves had been, working there longer than I'd been alive.
Makes you feel good.
Yeah, like, so I'm like, okay, well, shoot, now what am I supposed to do now? Like, I need to overcome that imbalance. And the way I overcame that imbalance was through this combination of like conviction with the right stories. Like, you don't have to know everything about everything, but as you kind of go through your sales journey, picking up pieces of information, customer stories, weaving them into your narrative, even if you look or seem young, the second you open your mouth, there's no reason why they can't see that you have tons of conviction and relevant experience in their field if you're saying and doing the right things.
Absolutely. Well, if that isn't advice for people out there that are just breaking into sales, I don't know what is. David, thank you so much for going through that and just talking about some of these nuances that are going on during this economic downturn and how we can help that with problems. I always leave off, instead of where can people find you, which we've kind of already mentioned here, your LinkedIn profile, probably your website, if you don't mind shouting that out again.
Yeah, cerebralselling.com is where you'll find everything, blogs. My YouTube channel is Cerebral Selling. So yeah, just
perfect.
Just go there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I just want to finish off with one last question for you, just kind of a quick one here. Besides your own book, what's a book that you'd recommend to a seller out there today?
Yeah, so one of my favorite sales books is Dan Pink's To Sell is Human. I'm a big Dan Pink fan, and I think it's a great book that harmonizes kind of a little bit of the science of selling as well as just like the humanity of it. And I'm a big fan of Dan Pink and the research he puts in, so that's a book I would highly suggest reading.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. The best of both. Well, David, thank you so much for being on here. And thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Shake Sales. We'll catch you next time.